The chandeliers of Lady Rutherford's ballroom cast a merciless golden light upon everything and everyone beneath them. Vivian Ashford stood at the room's periphery, a position she had occupied for the better part of 2 decades. At 40 years old, she had become a fixture of these events, present but unseen, acknowledged but never truly noticed. The pale lavender gown she wore, though finely made, carried an air of resignation. It was the color of women who no longer harbored illusions. 40 years old, and she still attends these affairs. The voice belonged to Lady Worthington, and it carried with deliberate cruelty across the marble floor. One must admire her persistence, though whether it's tragic or merely pathetic, I cannot decide. The laughter that followed was sharp and bright, like glass breaking. Vivian's fingers tightened imperceptibly around her fan. She had trained herself not to flinch, not to reveal the wound. Lady Penelope Worthington, a vision of youth in pristine white silk, leaned into her mother's observation with obvious delight. Perhaps she believes miracles still happen after 40, Mama. How charmingly naive. Vivienne felt the familiar heat rise in her cheeks. Not the flush of youth, but the slow burn of humiliation that had scored her soul year after year. She lifted her chin with practiced dignity and turned toward the terrace doors. The orchestra swelled with a waltz she would not dance. She had not danced in years. What she did not see was the tall figure who had entered the ballroom mere moments before, a man whose arrival had caused an immediate stir among the matchmaking mothers. Lucian Blackwood, Duke of Greystone, stood with the stillness of someone accustomed to being observed. His dark coat was immaculately tailored, his bearing that of a man who carried titles and responsibilities with equal weight. At 38, he remained London's most sought-after prize, a widower of considerable fortune, impeccable lineage, and the kind of reserved handsomeness that inspired dramatic sighs. He had witnessed the entire exchange, and he had noted, with a connoisseur's eye for authenticity, the way Miss Ashford had absorbed the cruelty without collapsing beneath it. There was something in her posture, a worn strength, a dignity earned through repeated trials, that arrested his attention far more effectively than any simpering debutante ever could. The gardens of Rutherford House offered merciful darkness and the whisper of early spring leaves. Vivian found her usual refuge, a stone bench tucked behind a towering hedge of boxwood, invisible from the main paths. She carried with her what she always brought to these ordeals, a book. Tonight, it was a dense analysis of European political economy, a topic that would have scandalized the ladies who had just mocked her. She found solace in ideas, in arguments constructed with logic rather than malice. She had just opened to her marked page when footsteps approached on the gravel path. Her heart sank. Even here, she could not escape. "I apologize for the intrusion." The voice was low, cultured, and entirely unexpected. "I was assured this garden was large enough for one person to disappear entirely." "I see the information was incomplete." Vivian looked up to find Lucian Blackwood standing before her, his expression somewhere between amusement and genuine apology. For a moment, she could only stare. The Duke of Greystone, here, speaking to her. "Your Grace?" She rose hastily, the book tumbling from her lap. He caught it with surprising swiftness, glancing at the title as he handed it back. Montesquieu's Treatise on Continental Trade Systems. His dark eyebrows rose. An unusual choice for a spring evening. "I find it more engaging than the conversations typically available at such gatherings," she replied, then immediately regretted her candor. Ladies were supposed to pretend enthusiasm for insipid small talk. But the Duke smiled, a real smile that reached his gray eyes and transformed his austere features. "Then we share similar tastes. I came to escape the 5th introduction of the evening to some young woman whose entire conversation consisted of weather observations and practiced laughter." Despite herself, Vivian felt her lips curve upward. How terrible for you, Your Grace, to be so relentlessly pursued. You mock me, Miss Ashford. Vivian Ashford. She paused, then added with deliberate irony, and yes, I suppose I do mock you slightly. Forgive me. At 40, one develops certain impertinences. She had said it deliberately, naming the thing that made her invisible, that marked her as irrelevant. She waited for the polite withdrawal, the sudden remembrance of another engagement. Instead, Lucian sat on the bench beside her, an action so unexpected she nearly gasped. At 38, I find impertinence far more refreshing than artificial charm. May I? He gestured to the book. I've been meaning to read Montesquieu's arguments about the Prussian tariff system. Does he make a compelling case? And so, beneath the indifferent stars and the judgmental windows of the ballroom, Vivian Ashford found herself in genuine conversation with the Duke of Greystone. They spoke of trade policies and political philosophy, of books they had loved and ideas they found intriguing. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, as if her words carried weight and meaning. She found herself responding with an animation she had thought long extinguished, her intelligence finally finding an appreciative audience. The spell broke when Catherine appeared on the path, her younger face creased with concern. Vivian, I've been searching everywhere. We should... She stopped abruptly, registering the Duke's presence. Her curtsy was flustered. Your Grace, forgive me. Nothing to forgive, Mrs. Catherine Ashford, Your Grace. Vivian's sister. Lucian rose with fluid grace. Then I must thank you for sharing your sister's company this evening, Mrs. Ashford. Our conversation has been the only civilized moment of this interminable event. He turned to Vivian, and she felt the full weight of his attention. Miss Ashford, I hope we might continue our discussion on another occasion. I find I have many more questions about Montesquieu's theories. After he departed with a bow, Catherine gripped Vivian's arm. The Duke of Greystone? Viv, what just happened? Vivian shook her head, already building walls around the small flame of hope that had sparked in her chest. Nothing, Catherine. A moment of kindness. Nothing more. Men like him do not notice women like me. But as they returned to the ballroom to collect their cloaks, Vivian caught sight of Lucian across the crowded space. He was surrounded by eager mothers and their daughters, yet his gaze found hers through the sea of people. He inclined his head slightly, an acknowledgement meant only for her. That night, in the small but comfortable townhouse she shared with Catherine and her young nieces, Vivienne lay awake. She had spent 20 years learning not to hope, teaching herself that expectations led only to deeper wounds. But her treacherous heart remembered the sound of his laugh, the genuine interest in his questions, the way he had looked at her as if she were visible. Dangerous, she thought. Hope was the most dangerous thing of all. The calling card arrived 3 days later, delivered with appropriate formality by a footman in Greystone livery. Catherine carried it to Vivian's small study as if it were made of glass. It's from him! Vivian's hand trembled as she took the cream-colored card. The Duke of Greystone requested the pleasure of Miss Vivian Ashford's company for a ride in Hyde Park, tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Beneath the formal script, he had added in his own hand, I have questions about Chapter 7. You must go, Catherine said immediately. Vivian, you must. I cannot. Vivian set the card down as if it burned her fingers. The park will be full of society. They will see us together, and the gossip, Catherine, the ridicule. What if it's not ridicule? Her sister's voice was fierce. What if he genuinely wishes to know you? What if, for once in your life, you allowed yourself something good? The words struck deep. When had Vivian last allowed herself anything good? When had she last reached for joy instead of merely enduring disappointment? She wrote her acceptance with a shaking hand. Hyde Park in spring was a theater of social performance. The fashionable hour brought out London's elite in their finest carriages and riding habits, parading along Rotten Row to see and be seen. Vivienne had chosen a deep emerald riding habit that Catherine insisted brought out the green in her hazel eyes, though Vivienne felt acutely conscious of the silver threading through her dark blonde hair. Lucian arrived precisely at 3, mounted on a magnificent bay stallion. He had brought a gentle mare for her, not the spirited mount a young woman might require to prove her daring, but a steady, intelligent horse suited to an experienced rider. The consideration in that choice made Vivienne's throat tight. "Miss Ashford." His smile was warm, private. "I've been anticipating this all week." They set off at an easy pace, and the conversation flowed as naturally as it had in the garden. He asked her opinion on parliamentary reforms. She challenged his views on agricultural policy. They debated the merits of classical versus contemporary literature. It was intoxicating, this exchange of ideas, this meeting of minds. "You must think me terribly bookish," Vivienne said, then caught herself. Why was she apologizing? This was who she was. "I think you extraordinary," Lucian replied quietly. "In a world of carefully rehearsed opinions and borrowed thoughts, you are genuinely, fiercely intelligent. It's remarkable." Something in his tone made her look at him fully. The admiration in his expression was unmistakable. And terrifying. "Your Grace, I must ask..." She forced the words out. "Why are you spending time with me? Surely you realize that society will find it peculiar. I am 40 years old, well past the age of what? Of being interesting, of being worthy of conversation?" His voice carried an edge now. "Miss Ashford, if you believe your age diminishes your value, then you have internalized the cruelest and most foolish prejudice of our society." Before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the afternoon air. "Your Grace, what an unexpected pleasure!" Lady Worthington approached in an elegant barouche, Lady Penelope at her side like a sacrificial offering in pink muslin. Both women's eyes widened at the sight of Vivienne, then narrowed with calculation. "Miss Ashford," Lady Worthington acknowledged with the barest civility. "How industrious of you to secure the Duke's attention. Though I'm certain His Grace is merely being charitable to his neighbors. He is known for his kindness to those less fortunate." The words were coated in honey but edged with venom. Vivienne felt the familiar shame rise, the sense of being exposed and ridiculous. She was 40 years old, riding beside the most eligible man in England, and everyone could see the absurdity of it. "Lady Worthington." Lucian's voice had gone cold, each syllable precisely enunciated. "I find your presumption about my motivations both tiresome and incorrect. Miss Ashford's company is sought for her considerable intellect and excellent conversation, qualities I find far more valuable than youth or affected charm. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have much to discuss." He guided his horse forward without waiting for a response, and Vivienne had no choice but to follow. Behind them, she heard the shocked silence, then the furious whisper of Lady Worthington's voice. When they were out of earshot, Lucian said quietly, "I apologize for my bluntness, but I will not tolerate such discourtesy toward you. You shouldn't have..." Vivienne's voice caught. "Your Grace, you've now made an enemy of one of society's most influential matrons. For my sake, it isn't wise." He turned to her, and his gray eyes held something fierce and tender at once. "Miss Ashford, Vivienne, I have spent 13 years being wise, being careful, being exactly what everyone expected. It has brought me nothing but emptiness. If defending you is unwise, then let me be foolish." The charity auction took place the following week at the Grosvenor Gallery, a glittering affair ostensibly dedicated to funding orphanages, but actually serving as another stage for social maneuvering. Vivian attended reluctantly, accompanying Catherine, who served on the organizing committee. She was examining a rather uninspired landscape painting when she heard the commotion near the entrance. Lady Worthington's voice carried across the gallery, shrill with indignation. "Your services are no longer required, Mrs. Henderson. I cannot have someone of your advanced years caring for my daughter. You're simply too old to be effective." Vivian turned to see an elderly woman, her gray hair tucked neatly beneath a modest bonnet, standing with rigid dignity as Lady Worthington dressed her down publicly. Mrs. Henderson had been the Worthington governess for over 20 years. Vivian knew. This dismissal was both cruel and unjust. Without thinking, Vivian crossed the gallery floor. "Lady Worthington, surely you cannot mean to dismiss Mrs. Henderson so callously. Her reputation as an educator is impeccable." "Miss Ashford?" Lady Worthington's smile was venomous. "How touching that you would defend her. Birds of a feather, I suppose. Both past your useful years." The words stung, but Vivian held her ground. Mrs. Henderson's age represents experience and wisdom, qualities you apparently do not value. However, I suspect many families would be grateful for her services. "Mrs. Henderson, would you consider a position with my sister? She has been seeking an experienced governess for her daughters." It was an improvisation, but Catherine quickly appeared at Vivian's side, nodding her agreement. Mrs. Henderson's eyes filled with grateful tears. Lady Worthington's face purpled with rage, but before she could respond, a deep voice interrupted. "Mrs. Henderson served as governess to my cousin's children for many years. Her dedication was exemplary. Lady Worthington, if you cannot recognize the value of loyalty and experience, I'm certain many others will." Lucian had materialized beside them, his presence carrying the weight of ducal authority. Lady Worthington had no choice but to retreat, though her expression promised future vengeance. After she departed, Lucian turned to Vivian. The look in his eyes made her breath catch. "That was extraordinary. You could have remained silent, avoided her wrath entirely. Instead, you stepped into the fire for someone who couldn't defend herself." "It was only right," Vivian murmured, uncomfortable with his intensity. "No." He shook his head. "It was brave. It was compassionate. It was everything that matters, and nothing that society claims to value." He paused, then said quietly, "Walk with me?" They moved to a quieter corner of the gallery, away from curious eyes and eager ears. Lucian looked at her with such focused attention that Vivian felt simultaneously exposed and cherished. "I need to tell you something," he said. "These past weeks, knowing you, speaking with you, Vivian, you've awakened something in me I thought died with my wife and child. You make me want to feel again, to live rather than merely exist. You challenge me, inspire me, make me laugh. I find myself thinking of our conversations at the oddest moments. I anticipate your opinions on everything. You have become essential." Vivian's heart hammered against her ribs. This couldn't be real. Men like him didn't say such things to women like her. "Your Grace." "Lucian, please." "Lucian." His name felt dangerous on her tongue. "I don't understand what you want from me. I am not young, not beautiful by any conventional measure. I have no illusions about what I am. The world has made my position quite clear." "Then the world is blind." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to an intimate register. "Vivian, I am asking permission to court you properly, to call on you, to spend time in your company, to see where this extraordinary connection might lead. I'm asking you to trust that when I look at you, I see everything that matters." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe. But 40 years of being overlooked, dismissed, and ridiculed had built walls around her heart that even his words struggled to penetrate. That night, Alone in her room, Vivienne confessed everything to Catherine. The conversations, the rides, his declaration in the gallery. And finally, her terror. "What if it's a cruel jest?" she whispered. "What if I allow myself to hope? And then what?" Catherine gripped her hands. "You'll have lived, Viv. You'll have taken a chance on happiness instead of hiding from it. Yes, you might be hurt, but you're already hurt. At least this way, you might also be loved." The invitation arrived the next morning. The Duke of Greystone requested the pleasure of Miss Vivian Ashford and Mrs. Catherine Ashford's company for a weekend at Greystone Manor. Lord Julian Blackwood, the Duke's elder brother, would also be in residence. Vivian held the heavy cardstock, her hands trembling. This was a line she couldn't uncross. Accepting meant stepping fully into his world, exposing herself to society's full scrutiny. Refusing meant safety, and a lifetime of wondering what might have been. "I'll send our acceptance," Catherine said firmly, taking the decision from her. "You're going, Vivian. We both are. It's time you let yourself have something beautiful." Greystone Manor rose from the Kentish countryside like something from a dream. Honey-colored stone, soaring windows, and grounds that rolled toward distant woodlands in waves of green. As their carriage approached along the tree-lined drive, Vivienne felt her courage faltering. She didn't belong in such a place. She was the spinster daughter of a country gentleman, a woman society had discarded. What was she doing here? Catherine squeezed her hand. "Breathe, dearest. Just breathe." Lucian met them at the entrance himself, rather than sending servants, a break with protocol that made Vivian's heart skip. He was dressed more casually than she'd seen him, and the setting revealed something softer in his features, a peace that London never permitted him. "Welcome to Greystone," he said, and the warmth in his voice felt like an embrace. "I hope you'll consider it a respite from the city's chaos." Lord Julian Blackwood appeared behind his brother, a broader, more weathered version of Lucian's aristocratic features. His greeting was hearty and without pretense. "Miss Ashford, Mrs. Ashford, delighted to finally meet you. My brother has spoken of little else for weeks." Vivian caught Lucian's slight grimace, and despite her nerves, she smiled. The weekend unfolded with surprising ease. Dinners were intimate rather than formal, conversations ranging freely across topics both serious and frivolous. Julian treated Vivian with effortless respect, his manner suggesting he'd already accepted her as part of their circle. Catherine and Julian discovered a shared passion for horticulture and spent hours discussing garden design. On the second evening, after dinner, Julian drew Vivian aside to the library while Lucian and Catherine examined a rare orchid in the conservatory. "Miss Ashford, forgive my directness, but I must speak plainly." Julian's expression was serious. "I haven't seen my brother truly happy since before his wife's death. He learned to function, to fulfill his duties, but the joy went out of him. These past weeks, since meeting you, he's come alive again. He laughs. He engages with life rather than simply enduring it. Whatever you think you are, whatever society has told you about your worth, I need you to understand something. You have given my brother back to himself. That is no small thing." Vivian's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I fear I'm not what he needs. He should marry a young woman who can give him heirs, He should marry someone who sees him as a man, not a title. Someone who challenges his mind and touches his heart. Someone real." Julian's voice gentled. "You are what he needs, Miss Ashford. The only question is whether you'll allow yourself to need him in return." The next afternoon, Lucian asked Vivian to walk with him through the estate gardens. Spring had dressed the grounds in extravagant beauty. Flowering trees shedding petals like snow, beds of tulips and narcissus blazing with color. They walked in comfortable silence at first, but Vivian felt the weight of unspoken words between them. He led her to a small rise overlooking a lake, where the setting sun painted the water in shades of amber and rose. There, he stopped and turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Vivian, I brought you here because I needed you away from London's prying eyes and poisonous whispers. I needed you to see my home, the place that is most truly mine. I needed to say something without interruption or audience. He paused, and she saw vulnerability in his face. This powerful, controlled man allowing himself to be unguarded. I am in love with you. The words struck her like a physical force. She tried to speak, but he pressed on. I love your brilliant mind, your dry wit, your quiet courage. I love the way you treat ideas as treasures and kindness as duty. I love that you see me, Lucian, not the Duke, not the title, not the fortune, just me. You've taught me that life doesn't end in loss, that joy is possible even after devastation. His grip on her hands tightened. Vivian Ashford, I am asking you to be my wife, not because I need an appropriate duchess, not because society expects it, but because I choose you. Above every other woman, in every possible world, I choose you. Tears spilled down Vivian's cheeks, and with them came the flood of everything she'd held back. I'm afraid. I'm so afraid. I'm 40 years old, Lucian. Society will mock you for this choice. They'll say you've lost your senses, that I've trapped you somehow. You could have anyone. Young, beautiful, from the finest families. Why would you choose me? Because you're you. His voice cracked with emotion. Do you think I care about society's opinions? Do you think I've survived the loss of a wife and child, 13 years of loneliness, only to choose safety over love? Vivian, you are not less because of your age. You are more. Every experience, every wound, every year has made you into the woman I love. I don't want a girl I have to mold. I want you, complex, intelligent, wounded, brave, real. I'm terrified of hoping, she whispered, of believing this is real. Then let me believe for both of us. He lifted one hand to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. Let me love you until you remember how to love yourself. Marry me, Vivian. Choose life with me. Choose us. In his eyes, she saw her reflection, not the invisible spinster, not the object of pity or mockery, but a woman worthy of passionate love. And something in her chest, something that had been locked away for 20 years, finally broke free. Yes. The word came out as a sob. Yes, Lucian. Yes. He kissed her then, and it was everything a first kiss should be. Tender and fierce, careful and desperate, a promise sealed between them. The sun set over Greystone's lake, painting them in gold, and Vivian felt herself transform. Not into someone different, but into who she had always been beneath the armor of survival. When they finally drew apart, Lucian smiled. That rare, genuine smile that transformed his austere features into something radiant. I love you, he said simply, and I will spend my life proving to you that you deserve to be loved. 3 weeks later, the announcement appeared in the Morning Post. The Duke of Greystone and Miss Vivian Ashford were engaged to be married. The news exploded through London society like a bombshell. The gossips worked themselves into a frenzy. How could the Duke choose a 40-year-old spinster over the cream of this season's debutantes? It was unprecedented, scandalous, utterly bizarre, and utterly final. The engagement ball was held at Greystone House in London, a magnificent townhouse that Vivian would soon call home. She dressed with Catherine's help, wearing a gown of deep sapphire silk that had been made specifically for the occasion, not a young girl's white, but a woman's color, rich and confident. "You're shaking," Catherine said softly, fastening a necklace of sapphires and diamonds around Vivian's throat. Lucian's engagement gift, along with the matching ring that now graced her finger. "Everyone will be there. Everyone who ever mocked me, dismissed me, used me as a cautionary tale." Vivian met her own eyes in the mirror. "I'm about to walk into that room as the future Duchess of Greystone." "You're about to walk in as yourself," Catherine corrected. "As you've always been. The only difference is that now, you're allowing yourself to be seen." When Vivian descended the staircase on Lucian's arm, the ballroom fell into a hush. Every eye fixed on them, the Duke, powerful and commanding, and beside him, the woman everyone had written off. Lady Worthington stood frozen near the refreshment table, Lady Penelope's expression a rictus of shock and envy. But Lucian looked at Vivian as if she were the only person in the room, as if she were precious beyond measure. And when they began the first waltz, his hand firm at her waist, his gray eyes never leaving hers, Vivian understood something profound. She had not been chosen despite her 40 years. She had been chosen because of them. Because those 40 years had shaped her into a woman of substance, of depth, of hard-won wisdom and resilient strength. She had been chosen not as a compromise, but as a prize. As they turned across the floor, Lucian leaned close and whispered, "What are you thinking?" She smiled up at him, and for the first time in decades, the smile reached all the way to her soul. "That it took me 40 years to become the woman you could love, and I wouldn't change a single one of them." "Neither would I," he said, and kissed her hand as the music swelled. "Neither would I." They married 6 weeks later in a ceremony that blended intimate joy with ducal grandeur. And when Vivienne became the Duchess of Greystone, she did so not as someone transformed into worthiness, but as someone who had finally been seen for the worth she'd possessed all along. In the years that followed, they would face society's judgment and overcome it. They would build a life rich in conversation, companionship, and passionate devotion. They would prove that love need not bow to convention, that second chances exist for those brave enough to claim them. But on that wedding day, as Lucian slipped the ring onto her finger and spoke his vows with fierce certainty, Vivian knew only one truth. She had been invisible for 40 years, dismissed and diminished, until the one man who mattered chose to truly see her. And in his seeing, she had finally learned to see herself.